chugging along, you kind of know what the stations are, right? The next station is you pick your classes for the next year, you can get the best grades you could possibly get, take the right AP classes, right? Some of you are going to go to one dance or maybe more, right? Some other of you are going to maybe study really, really hard for the SAT, try to get the best score you possibly can, and then go apply for college. And then you're going to get into a college. And suddenly you're going to realize that you've now hit the end of this track, this railroad. You've gotten to the final destination. So you look out the window and you're like, oh my God, there's no more track left. Like, where do we go from here? You spent the last 6 years, maybe some of you a little bit less if you're not a senior yet, of your life at Oxford, shooting for this destination of college. And then you get there and you're like, wait a minute, like what comes after this? Like what's the next goal? I'm not really sure, right? Is it to just graduate college with the best grades? Is that really the goal of all this? Like, am I just trying to graduate with this fancy diploma and just walk across the stage and then what, right? Go get a job? For me, I think it's a much, much bigger question around what you're doing with your life, right? It's basically you take what you want to do with your life and you work backwards and you get to where we are today with Oxford Career Night. So, this is the advice that I would give myself. Oh man.
It's digital now.
Yeah, exactly. Myself as a 7th grader with my tucked in Oxford uniform, with my rolling backpack, going to my lockers every day. I know. I was there. And this is the advice that I would give myself. I would give myself, if I were in these chairs, the advice to become more self-aware about what your passions are. And then essentially, once you are lucky enough to discover what that is, go pursue it. And I know that kind of sounds like a really like pie in the sky, like James just telling me today, like go do what you love. Like, and then we're just gonna he's just gonna drop the mic and then we're gonna be done, right? No. We're gonna talk about some actionable advice today that you guys can do today, or actually even tonight as you're going to these panels, about what it actually means to find your passion and then pursue it. Make sense? What's happening behind me?
Sorry, I'm trying to fix the view. It's a little off.
Does it still work? No? Oh.
Sorry. Just keep going.
All right. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the first half of that quote, right? So in your life, you should be doing 2 things: discovering your passion and then pursuing it. The problem is, the first part of that quote, discovering passion, is actually really, really hard. Like, a lot of people are like, go do what you love, go discover your passion. I remember when I was in high school, people would tell me that, and I'd be like, what does that even mean? Like, how do I know like what I'm passionate about? And like, how do I even know if that makes money, right? So that's a problem. And to be honest, until like my 5th grade teacher had like dropped the word entrepreneur on me, like I didn't even really use that as a label to like really describe what I was doing. I thought it was just being a distraction in class, right? So the first step in thinking about your passion is reflection. And this is really interesting because my hypothesis here is that each and every one of you in this room today already has something that you're passionate about, but you just may not know yet. So there's a couple questions that you can ask yourself, right? Like, what gets you really excited to wake up in the morning? What makes you feel like you're in a flow state? And what that means is basically like when you're doing this thing, you forget about time. Like time just goes away, right? It could be when you're working on a science project, even though it's homework, you're actually like, like time just goes by. You're like, this is really, really easy for me, right? It could be something in the arts. For me, it was entrepreneurship. There's nothing that I would like more than to be in a room with a team of people that I've put together to go tackle a problem together. That's really, really exciting to me. If you were like James, you have a choice between doing that and playing video games all night, what would you do? I would actually choose that, weirdly enough, right? That's the kind of nerd that I am about entrepreneurship. What are you a nerd about, basically? And the funny thing is, I know that we're at a career night, but the answer doesn't actually have to be like a certain job. The answer is not like, oh man, I'm so passionate about law. I'm just gonna go be a lawyer and make my parents happy. All the parents in here are like, yeah. Right? It doesn't have to be that. It can actually be a lot of different things. My point is to look back at your day. Look back at the last week, for example, and think about where you spent your time. You spent your time maybe on the weekends with some family members. Maybe you were hanging out with your friends. Maybe you went to church. Maybe you went to go to a sports game. You watched a movie, right? And then maybe there are certain classes that stand out to you. You really like English, math, the arts, STEM classes, things like that, right? There's something there that you feel like that you can latch onto, basically. So the Japanese have this saying called ikigai, and basically it's this idea that there's a really sweet spot right here in the middle that combines all the things that essentially that we've been talking about. There's what you're good at, like your things that skills that you can develop. There's what you love, which is what we were just talking about. There's what the world needs, which is something that I know Oxford kids are really, really good at, is looking at problems that can be solved in the world and tackling those. And then, when you get to a certain point, what can you be paid for? And we'll get to that in a second. But again, you can see that there's overlaps in between all these things, but the real sweet spot here is in the middle. So maybe that thing could be like you're really dedicated to church. And so for example, that's what you want to optimize for the rest of your life. Or maybe something is you really love spending time with family. I want you to hold on to that because again, we're in a career night. A lot of you are going to be like, oh, I really want to just make as much money as possible, right? But family is actually a really, really interesting thing to optimize toward. And I don't think it has to be just one thing, right? Like for me, I'm actually passionate about a lot of things, and my friends know it too. Like when I'm hanging out with them, I'm always talking about it, I'm always excited about it. So think about what that might be for you. So the second thing is be curious. So the idea is that now you have maybe a small inkling about what it is that you're passionate about, right? Like you have a couple of ideas, you're not really sure if they can become jobs yet, you're not really sure if there's something that you would be really excited about if you really go do it, right? Like you may think oh man, I really want to go be a movie producer. And then you show up to the movie sets and you're like, 3 months in, you're like, oh man, this is the worst work ever, right? So the second idea is to be curious. And the idea is once you have an idea of the 1, 2, or 3 things that you're excited about, go jump in and do some research. Get excited about it, right? It's okay to be really, really nerdy about it, like I said. So I think I'm jealous of all of you guys because it's so easy for you guys just to access all kinds of information now about any passion that you have, right? I remember we used to have to go across the street to the Cypress Library and check out a book about the things that we're excited about. And now you can just Google, you can watch things on YouTube, right? You can even take online classes for free all over the web. There's a lot of things that you can do to go actually scratch that itch. The other thing that I would tell you, and this is something that you can actually do tonight because we have so many people around here, is find a mentor. This is actually one of the most transformative things in my entire life. I can't tell you how important this is. Find someone who's just a few years past where you are today, and just ask them, how did you navigate this decision of what to do for college? What did you do for your career? And just let them share that with you. And the reason why I say that is because, and I say this with my mom sitting right here, is that mainly we know that all of our parents are our mentors, but we stopped listening to them 10 years ago, right? But we need people who actually can come in and be like, yeah, I was just in your shoes 4 years ago, 3 years ago. I know what it's like to go through Oxford. I know how hard it is. But guess what? Here's step 1, step 2, step 3. Here's some things that you can look at to make these big decisions in your life. That's so, so helpful. So the reason I'm bringing that up today is because we have all these mentors who are going to be on these panels. It's going to be great for you guys to go there and listen to them talk. They're going to be sitting up here and you're going to ask them some questions. But you know where the real value comes is actually going up to them afterwards and introducing yourselves and being like, hey, I'm actually really interested in what you just said, X, Y, Z. You said something really interesting. Do you mind if I send you an email afterwards and just ask you some more questions? It's so, so powerful. I wish that I had more mentors in high school. And just threw this in here because these are actually Arthur and Neil are actually 2 of my first mentors when I got to college. These guys taught me how to be productive in college and not screw around all the time. They taught me how to properly thank people, after going and meeting with someone, writing a handwritten thank you card. They taught me to hold and carry around a notebook at all times because you never know where you're going to have inspiration and you can write something down. They taught me all these important lessons that I feel as a freshman coming into college, I just had no idea. This is a completely different level. And the last thing in terms of discovering your passion is just try it. There's only so much you can learn from just reading things online, taking classes and things like that. But this is why people do internships, right? I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this mythical thing called an internship or an apprenticeship or something like that. If you are really interested in finding out what this thing is like that you want to do, the only way for you to really find out if you like it or not is to go try it. And I would say give yourself 3 months, right? Just make 3 months. You've been at Oxford, 5, 4, 6 years, right? 3 months is nothing. Go try something really, really dedicated to your passion for 3 months and just figure it out. See if you really like it or not. Give yourself a taste. So one of the, again, I'm going to reemphasize the fact that I was very nerdy in high school and I would choose this over video games. But for example, knowing that I cared about entrepreneurship in Oxford, I actually tried to start my own club. You can see we even did the most important thing, which is we printed t-shirts for our club. And basically we would have these meetings on the weekend, right? Like who's giving up like a freaking weekend on like a Saturday to go to like my dad's office and sit around a conference room table and talk about sports marketing or whatever it was that day, right? It's so weird, right? But that's my passion, right? And that's kind of part of what I wanted to try when I was in high school. So the exciting part of this, the trying part, is it becomes really, really expensive for you to try things when you graduate from college, right? Like once you graduate from college and you have to pay for rent and this thing called renter's insurance, which is super weird, right? And all these things, trying things at that time becomes a little bit more expensive. When you're at Oxford and when you're in college, trying is basically free. You can go join all these clubs, you can go do these internships. People actually want to teach you because you're a student. So fast forward a little bit, I'm in college, and I'm all the way down this entrepreneurship path. I'm super excited about it. But turns out all these people around me are getting all these job offers. I remember one day my roommate walked in to my dorm, and he goes, "James, I have great news." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I just got a full-time offer from PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the top 4 accounting firms, and they're gonna pay me $100,000 a year." I'm like, woo, right? $100,000, yeah, right? I gotta be honest, 90% of me was like super excited for him. 10% of me was like terrified. The reason why was because the last 2 summers, this is my senior year, the last 2 summers, my junior year and my sophomore year, instead of getting real internships, like most people do when they want to go on these tracks, I ended up just having friends over for the summer to like run startups with me. So it was a totally, completely off the beaten path kind of track. So all my friends are coming back and they're like, "I got a job at McKinsey. I got a job at all these places that like would make no sense to you guys, right? Like all these places that are like top 4, accounting, investment banking, like 6-figure salaries straight out of the gate." And I'm like, oh no, like I messed up. Like I really messed up, right? Like graduation is like 6 months away, I don't have a job offer, this is bad. Again, I've been spending the last 4 months like really building my companies, my startups. So I was working on these projects. So I remember I felt all this FOMO. You guys all know what FOMO is, right? Like fear of missing out. And so I show up in my nicest suit and I go interview at these consulting companies because I know like my parents wanted me to have a nice paying job. They didn't immigrate here to the United States for me to like just screw around and like go start a company, right? So I go and do all these interviews and I'm walking out of my 2nd round interview with one of the top consulting firms. I'm feeling great. This is in Washington, D.C. So I'm like in a suit, I'm like walking down the street, I'm like feeling great. And suddenly I run into one of my startup mentors. Like he's like, "James." I'm like, "Oh, hey." He's like, "Why are you wearing a suit?" Because he knows I'm the startup guy, right? I'm like, "Oh, I just came from McKinsey." I was like, the office was like really, really nice. They even had a waterfall inside the office. It was super nice. He's like, I kid you not, what happened next was he slapped me on the street. He's like, James, we all know that you're very excited and passionate about startups. We all know if you went and got a consulting job, yes, it would pay well, but you'd probably be pretty miserable. So why don't we do this? Like, why don't you come and work at our accelerator, which is like a startup, like incubator type thing, and we'll invest, I don't know, $30,000. We know it's not a lot for a company, but we'll give you your first shot straight out of college. How about that? And that's how we ended up at Acceleprise. Basically, the first place out of college, I basically was able to start a company straight out of college. But that was an amazing reminder to me because I had been sucked into this environment at Georgetown where everyone was going down these specific tracks. Accounting, finance, and investment banking. It's basically like, that's the entire world. And you keep thinking like, oh man, like I have to go find one of these jobs here. But had I really been self-aware and passionate about what I was really, caring about, what we talked about in the previous slides, like I would have been able to really own that. And that's really what I want to talk about here. So we talked about how do you find your passion. Now we're talking about how do you actually pursue it once you're lucky enough to discover it, right? So the first thing is own it. When you go to college, you're going to be surrounded by tons of people who are all trying to just fit in. They're all like trying to be like part of the same mass, right? If you have your own passions, you're excited about something, just be excited about it. Like, own it, essentially, right? Go join that club. Go start that club if that club doesn't exist. Right? For me, I had to go dedicate a lot of my time to starting these companies, while all of my other friends were on all these amazing clubs that were giving away free food and all their meetings. And I was like, oh no, sorry guys, I got like another night in the library. I'm just gonna go work on my company. They're like, are you sure? Like, I was like, yeah. And so the guy actually literally slapping me in the face was like a figurative slap in the face to remind me that it's okay to be different and to own like your passion. The second thing is, once you know what that passion is, invest in yourself. This is a time where you go from that mentor who's like 2 years ahead of you and has a little bit of generic knowledge about what your life is, and go like specialize, basically. You go, like for example, if you really want to focus on medicine, go find a mentor who has actually had experience being a doctor, right? Like this is where you actually start honing in, and you get a few mentors who you grab coffee with, and you say, hey, what did you do like to get to a position that you're in? What are the biggest lessons that you learned? What do you recommend that I do right now if you were in my shoes? That's huge. The other thing is just read voraciously. If you look at any of the people who are at the top of their craft around the world, these people have huge libraries where they're reading. And the reason why they're reading is because it's like having a whole library of mentors that you have access to 24/7. And you get to distill their entire life's knowledge into one book and then download it into your brain through osmosis, right? It's really amazing. But really invest in yourself. Take the classes that you need to take. Go do the internships that you need to do. Like really, really dive in. And finally, pursue. Now, I was thinking about putting the word pursue here because it lines up with the quote. But what this really should be is like sacrifice. Because when you've decided that this is something that you're passionate about, whether it's family, whether it's religion, whether it's a certain career, whether it's whatever you want to optimize your life toward, what you're really telling yourself is, what sacrifices am I willing to make? If I were to tell all of you guys right now that one day, you can go live in a really, really nice house in your favorite city in the world, it has a nice infinity pool on the outside that overlooks the ocean, and then all day you just have people feeding you grapes. Most of you would be like, yeah, that's a pretty good life, right? So that's actually not a really hard decision to make. If I'm like, hey, would you want that? You'd be like, yeah, I want that, right? But the flip side of that question is, what sacrifice are you willing to make that happen? What sacrifice are you willing to put in to make that passion happen? So I'm going to end on this story actually about my dad. A little bit more of a personal story. So my junior year, I was up at 6 a.m. in the morning, Eastern time, studying for a test, last minute, of course, for my 8 a.m. Philosophy class. And as I was in the library studying, I suddenly get a phone call from my dad. Now you have to understand something. My dad is like the OG entrepreneur in my life. This is a photo of me. Yeah, believe it or not, that's me. In my dad's office with my mom, where they were selling computer hardware once they, a few years after they immigrated from China. And so I grew up like in the back office of this store. So the entrepreneurial blood that I have in me comes from him. So I get this call from my dad. Again, it's 6 a.m. Eastern time, so it's 3 a.m. Pacific time. And I pick up the phone. He goes, James, I'm in the hospital. My first reaction is, what happened to mom? And he goes, it's not mom, it's me. And I go, oh shoot, what happened? And he decides to read off. He actually sends me a photo of this slip of paper that the doctor wrote for him of what heart condition he was just diagnosed with. And I look it up, I plug it into Google, and I remember this. The first thing, how Google has these little snippets at the top where it answers your question? The first thing it says is like 60% fatality rate. And I'm like, screw this philosophy test, right? Like this entire time, you care about these A's, you care about like optimizing your life toward all these things, like getting into the best college possible, getting to the next job that you can, so you can elevate your resume all along the way. And then suddenly this happens, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm 5 hours away, like I can't really get home and everything like that. Luckily for me, my dad, after a long open heart surgery, was okay. But what was really interesting was that his life perspective completely changed after that. And I'm sure that for many of you who've either unfortunately had something happen in your family or have had someone either pass away or had like a major medical incident, they probably felt the same way. Where they feel like their life is seen through a different lens after they come out of the hospital. They feel like they have a new lease on life, right? They think, wow, wait a minute, I just had this heart condition at 50. I'm not supposed to have heart stuff until like I'm 60 or 70. Life is actually pretty short. And you end up thinking that, wow, okay, well if life is short, then I should really spend my time doing what I'm passionate about, right? So that's kind of the real message I wanted to share with all of you today, and the message that really that my dad has shared with me, which is, again, life is all about finding and discovering what your passion is, and then wholeheartedly, relentlessly pursuing it. The kicker of all this is that when my dad woke up from his anesthesia, the nurse at his bedside that said hi to him said, "Hi, Mr. Lee," is actually an Oxford grad. And to me, I was like, all right, God, that's all you need to tell me. I'm good. I'm good. But again, what this really, really means is, and this actually dug this out today. This is my 6th grade yearbook. Is if you're lucky enough to find what you're passionate about, spend all the time on what you love, and spend all your time with the people that you love. Thank you.